back to another episode of the Unscripted Pharmacist. Once again, I'm with Chris Stevenson, and we are going to talk about statins today.
Yes, we've had quite a few episodes now. In fact, we can't even remember how many now. So
yeah, that's a good thing.
There's been a lot of great information, over the months that has come out, and today we're going to do a deep dive into statins. And before we start, I just want to say that it's funny that we both work kind of the
what's
same
up with
thing.
that?
Yeah,
Huh? We're
totally
coordinated.
coincidental.
I love it. You got the memo. I sent an email. Like, is this okay? Wardrobe approval?
There was no memo.
Good.
That's funny. But let's start off by talking a little bit about exactly what statins are for people that are not aware. By the way, Kyle is a pharmacist, and I'm an oncology nurse. We both work in Northern California, and I can tell you what I know about statins. Now, the cardiovascular field is not my specialty, but in nursing, know that. Well, you're a pharmacist, but statins are cholesterol-lowering drugs, and there's been a lot of controversy, a very heated, really, debate about the safety and efficacy of statins, and that's where we're going today, right?
Yeah, my understanding of statins was not super awesome or wasn't thorough until I started really delving into, when I started looking into food and the whole controversy about saturated fat and cholesterol. Mm-hmm. Once I started going down, chasing that rabbit down that hole, it was like, all right, well then, what's the application of statins? And I really didn't know. Okay, when I remember being in my residency at UCSF, and we had journal club, and here I was, I'm newly graduated pharmacist. I don't know much. I haven't looked at a ton of studies, but here we are, journal club with these students, and we're talking about, one of the statin trials. Man, I didn't know what some of this stuff was. And it's so interesting going back and reading it now with a better understanding of what I was really reading then. Because a lot of us were just kind of scratching our heads going, I don't know what's going on. What's a run-in period? Is that normal? I don't know. What's relative risk versus absolute risk? Which I love to talk about now. So it's totally different. I love talking about cholesterol. I love talking about, is LDL really the boogeyman, right? Or is it just the fireman, that's putting out the fire and he just happens to be at the scene of the crime, right? So as I've learned more about this, I realize that it's probably not that useful. And probably more importantly, as I've been dispensing these meds over decades, going, all right, is this really useful? And I would say it's only been in the last 10 years that I go, all right, do you have any side effects from these drugs? Have you ever noticed things like brain fog, muscle aches?
We hear a lot about
You do?
muscle aches and pains. In fact, I read a statistic that 62% of people stop taking statin drugs because of one of these side effects.
Yeah,
and that's
those are the
only
smart ones.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Like, okay, you stopped, perfect, right?
If 62% of people stop it seems like you've got a problem here.
Yeah, there's a significant problem. We'll talk about percentages and the side effects. I think that's really important. But the question is, did the doctor go over the side effects with you? Mm-hmm. Like, how many people out there, the doctor just writes for it because he's mandated. Mm-hmm. Now, let's get something straight. We're not here to bash doctors, right? And this is not medical advice. Go to your doctor, talk to him, work with him, okay? This is important. It's not their fault that they don't know this information, okay? We'll talk about why they don't know the information and how much of their information that they have is misinformation that is conflicted by the drug companies. All right. So really, what's the risk versus benefit? And have you had a clear discussion with your doctor about the potential risks and really how, in my opinion, minuscule the benefits really are? Okay. How many people are we exposing to these medications that are actually healthy? Okay, and we're not helping things any better by adding a medication with certain toxicities that can be extremely dangerous. And I would say this, don't accept the fact that, I'm getting older, and that's why I'm forgetting things, and that's why I got brain fog, or my muscle aches, I'm not able to run around like I used. It's not because you're getting older. At least you should probably investigate a little bit further.
It might be.
Yeah, it could be a side effect of a statin, which
like
unfortunately 85 million people are on this medication.
In the United States?
In the United
worldwide?
States. It's a significant
And worldwide,
amount
it's
of
gotta
people.
be a crazy number.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's insane. But think about how much money they're making on that. I think statins have a place. I think it's extremely, a very small percentage of the population, a very small percentage of people, it may actually be beneficial. These are people that are pretty sick. And usually they've already had a heart attack. Okay? So let's talk about, today we're going to talk about the evidence, what are the conflicts of interest, and really what data do we actually have to review from the original studies. And that is the most controversial part of this whole equation here, is why don't we have the data? Independent researchers should be allowed to have the original data, especially when it comes to efficacy and side effects.
And if you'd asked me if in the world of medicine, especially in American medicine, if all data is available to everyone, I would have said yes.
Of course.
But
of course you
that's
have.
actually
Yeah, but you
not
didn't
true.
pay for that data,
No.
right? And the amount of money that we're spending on NIH grants, is minuscule in comparison to what the drug companies are spending on research and development, right?
Right.
The NIH doesn't have the budget that a drug company has, right? Not to mention, if you're a drug company, boy, you could sure get things approved quicker. You could bypass a whole lot of red tape if you did it yourself, and you held the data yourself. And so there's a lot of controversy around that. And I think there's some sneaky drug companies that may be to blame. And that's why I'm asking for a statin recall. Okay? We'll talk later in the program about what you can actually do about it as a taker or as a patient that's on a statin. What can you do? What tools do you have? Not only that, but you're sitting here watching this program. You're going to have some tools. We're going to give you some information that you can go back to your doctor and say, hey, doc, let's have this conversation again, which really is informed consent about taking a statin, right? That may potentially hurt you.
Okay, you got a bunch of slides today. We got to.
Yeah, I got tons of slides.
'Cause
Oh, yeah.
I know Kyle. He's passionate about these
Yes.
things. He will talk.
Yeah, okay,
And
yes.
as he gets into the weeds, I'll try to help.
Yeah, bring me back, whatever you do. Okay.
I'll try to help explain. All
Yeah.
right. So do they care about you? You're talking about the drug companies and
The drug companies.
Yes.
Okay, your doctor genuinely does care. Okay, but unfortunately, the CMEs, right? The continuing medical education that he gets is sponsored by the drug company. So what angle do you think you're going to get when these doctors go out and they go to these meetings? It's sponsored by the drug company. So what are you going to get? You're going to get a canned lecture by a paid physician, okay, to give their lecture. That doctor will then be paid for that service.
Yeah.
So
Now
what do you think? As you keep getting money from somebody, you start liking them a little bit more.
Yeah,
Right?
the profit motive, of course, is huge for the drug companies, but for people in academia, people in medicine,
Yeah.
they can say to themselves, I can justify my taking of this X number of dollars for an honorarium or a consulting fee from a drug
Entertainment,
company.
absolutely. Research for your school, right? For the institution.
But once you start taking this money, it's a slippery slope, man.
It is a slippery slope. And there's some physicians, I've even had one physician, I think his name is Fred Stair, and he even said, some of my colleagues think that I'm a monster because I keep taking money from drug companies.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay. So, but the question is, who cares most about your health other than you? We've gone through this COVID thing. We've seen a lot of smoke and mirrors here. There's a lot of controversy about who's really helping you, okay? And we're going to talk about the head of the FDA, right? Dr. Robert Califf. We're going to talk about him today. And why is he conflicted, right? We know that things aren't on the up and up. That's been going on for decades. But we are the ones, the American people are the ones paying the price. But now you have the same access to the information that doctors have, and you didn't pay $300,000 for your education to get that. At a click of a button, you can read these studies. And in these show notes, I have provided links to many of these review articles and studies to show you that the data really isn't there. The evidence really isn't there.
Yeah.
All right.
Plus, we're going to see a lot of slides that are somewhat detailed, and if you're watching this on your computer, you can pause this and take a close look, and I would recommend that you do that. Or if you're on YouTube, of course, or something, that you can do that as well.
That's what I do all the time.
Yeah.
Hit pause, take a screenshot, go look it up. Everybody can look at the stuff I gave you the links. You have the original articles, and you can go see for yourself. And I would recommend that for everybody. I don't want to hear, I believe you. I can't stand hearing that. What I really want to hear is, I'm going to go check that out.
Yeah. At the same time, I do believe you.
I know, gosh. All right, I agree. But I would say this: don't trust any expert. If somebody's qualified as an expert, man, I'm suspicious of that word already, right? People who are experts sit on these guideline panels. We're going to talk about these people and how conflicted they are and why, all right? And how we got there. But before, let's talk about the ultimate conflict of interest. Here you have Ansel Keys.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I remember Ansel Keys.
What's his qualifications? He's got nothing, huh?
All right, wait. Ansel Keys was the guy that proposed this heart lipid hypothesis, which basically said that if your cholesterol's high, it deposits plaque on the inside of your arteries, and then you have heart disease, and you're more likely to die.
He thought it was saturated fat.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes, saturated fat.
Yeah.
Right.
And saturated fat comes with cholesterol. Boom, cholesterol's there. Let's just throw saturated fat and cholesterol together.
Okay.
Right?
All right, which is sort of the beginnings of the whole statin issue, because heart disease, strokes are a major killer.
Heart disease and strokes
smoking.
Back in those days. Yeah, hello.
And so the theory was, if you could just lower this cholesterol, then your heart attack rate is going to go down and down and down.
And he cherry-picked that data.
Did that happen?
Well, it kind of did, because smoking cessation, Smoking cessation was huge, right?
Huge.
Yeah, and it had a big benefit. But here you got Eisenhower in 1955 having a heart attack, Oval Office. Everyone's worked up, so it becomes the center focus of everyone's life and lifestyle. And if you look back at those photos back in those days when people were eating so much more fat, how much skinnier they looked. And then you got the French paradox, right?
Right.
Here's these people eating 40% saturated fat. If you've been to Paris, if you've been to France, you've noticed, and you have.
I have.
A lot of skinny people there.
Yeah, a lot more than here.
A lot more than here.
Yeah.
Why? My take on it really essentially is that they like butter, they like cheese, they like saturated fat, they like their meat. They're like, okay, their food doesn't need sugar. Sugar and refined carbohydrates really is at the center of this. That's the center. That's the cause.
Yes. Because when your blood sugar raises, your insulin level raises, it's the insulin that's your problem.
That's your metabolic syndrome.
Not your cholesterol.
It's not cholesterol. It's kind of more of a, there's a certain type, and we should really hit home on this in our discussion today. There is a certain type of abnormal LDL that is created through this insulin resistance, this metabolic syndrome that so many people suffer from. That's high triglycerides and low HDL. And if you want to talk about a subset of people that are really sick with high triglyceride, low HDL, that have an abnormal LDL particle, very small, like sand, like we talked about in our last episode, as well as a clotting abnormality. That's the other little kicker to this. When you put all that together, man, you're asking for trouble. That's a bomb about ready to go off.
That's right.
So I love looking at lipid panels. I think it's something everyone should look at. Don't ignore that HDL. Don't ignore the fact that thing's almost always in the red or the yellow, and it's typically below 50. Okay, so if we're looking at ratios, right, it should be less than 2. More like 1.5 or less. So triglycerides and HDL. Go get your lab slip. Go look at your triglyceride and your HDL.
Yeah. As an aside, I want you to know that I had my labs done before and after I started the low carb diet, and my triglyceride HDL level or ratio was 3.5. That's crazy high.
That started.
That's way too high.
Yeah, you're at risk.
I'm at risk.
Actually, almost 4 times the likelihood of having an event.
Okay. So my latest labs. 1.8.
Nice.
Still not perfect.
See, this is what I say.
That's so much better.
That's amazing. That's fantastic.
See, it works. It worked.
Yes.
It worked for me.
It didn't take you that long.
No, it took 3-4 months.
Matter of fact, this is what I tell patients. If your triglyceride to HDL ratio does not improve, please don't tell me you're doing keto.
Yeah.
You know?
All right.
So we should explain that just for 1 second.
Okay.
Triglyceride to HDL ratio.
Then we got to hit the slides.
Yeah, we got to hit the slides. Okay, so
All right.
why do you have high triglycerides in the first place? If you have high triglycerides, it's because fat isn't your primary fuel source. So triglycerides, fat, tend to pool up, essentially.
So if you're eating a lot of carbs.
Right, carbs is your energy source.
Right.
Fat is not. So fats, they accumulate a little bit, and we see that in your triglyceride of VLDL, the amount of triglycerides you have floating around in your bloodstream. Okay, that's a huge indicator and a really, really good example of what would cause cardiovascular disease. And I will tell you this: high triglycerides do affect clotting factors. So that's another little. So does having a low HDL affects clotting factors. These things are independent from the fact that you probably have small, dense LDL particles. This is a surrogate marker for insulin resistance. This is a surrogate marker for metabolic syndrome. High triglycerides, low HDL, hypertension, okay, obesity, and a couple other symptoms of the metabolic syndrome. High insulin levels. I'm going to throw in dementia. I'm going to throw in cancer as well.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
All
okay.
right, slide.
All right. Wow, this is where kind of the origin comes from. It was in 1908, there was a Russian physician by the name of Ignatowski fed rabbits with a diet rich in animal proteins like milk, meat, and eggs. Rabbits don't eat this.
Yeah.
No wonder they got atherosclerosis. So they could see the atherosclerosis on dissection that accumulated in their aorta, right? This is not a coincidence, right?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Ansel Keys thing,
Yeah.
where he's talking about
sure.
the saturated fats being your problem and the Eisenhower thing you were talking
Let's
about.
blame it on the sausage while he's smoking cigarettes one after another, okay? And also, he had heart disease prior to even becoming a president. So in 1961, Peter Ahrens published a report on carbohydrate-induced lipemia, and what he showed in that study, so we know that rabbits they're not designed to be eating animal cholesterol, right? So of course they're going to have atherosclerosis. This is rather obvious. But what Peter Ahrens showed is that after somebody has fasted, what really clouds your plasma or really makes your blood full of fat was actually a high carbohydrate breakfast versus a low carb, high fat breakfast creates more of a clear. If you were to take the blood and spit it out, the plasma is quite clear after you eat fat. If you eat a whole lot of carbohydrates, you make your blood cloudy and full of fat.
Not what you'd expect.
Right, you aren't what you eat. Okay?
Yeah.
If you eat a bunch of fat, you would expect to see a bunch of fat in the bloodstream.
Yeah.
You would get that if you ate a bunch of carbs with the fat, but it's the carbs that are causing it. But unfortunately, the ship had already sailed. It was already, saturated fat in the diet, and that's what causes cardiovascular disease. All right. So we have these drugs that are total failures for lowering cholesterol. Triperenol, that was recalled after 53 deaths.
I remember this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, I remember this one. This is where the company that made it was hiding data. I mean, they were like blatantly dishonest about the data and the side effects. And it caused a lot of horrible side effects.
This one here causes cataracts and all kinds of skin problems. And this one was recalled pretty quick. A 6-year-old kid with cataracts, you're blind in one eye. That's pretty significant. So remember that, 53 deaths. Because I'm here to say that statins cause a lot more than 53 deaths.
Right.
And that got recalled.
Yeah. Yeah, so eventually we found out about the problems with triperenol.
Yeah.
And that got removed from the market after a big
But we've
trial.
already so focused now on its cholesterol. Any drug that lowers cholesterol is going to work.
Yeah.
Supposedly. And one of them, the studies that we're going to talk about, is the cholestyramine. That was like the first big, and what that drug does, it binds the bile acids, right? So what it does, and that's why I put the gallbladder and gallstones on this slide, was that bile salts are made out of cholesterol, and they are recycled. So the amount of cholesterol inside the body pretty much stays finite. If you eat more cholesterol, you'll poop it out, right?
Yeah.
If you don't, you'll keep recycling right? Bile salts go into the GI tract, which are made out of cholesterol, and then it gets recirculated and reabsorbed by the intestines later on in the GI tract, okay? So you have this recycling, and that's what Crestor did. Crestor bound the bile salts, and so they would be pooped out. So your overall cholesterol would drop. Well, it should work, but you're going to have a lot of GI side effects. Holy crap. Oh, it's the worst thing ever. People have the worst diarrhea and upset stomach like no other. And I would also say other failures is really statins. Statins really haven't been shown to be effective, especially at primary prevention. Those are people that haven't had a heart attack.
Right.
And we'll get into why.
Yeah. Primary versus secondary.
Primary versus secondary. Secondary, you've already had a heart attack, right?
Yeah.
All right, so then in the 1980s, here's the first study on Crestor, right? So 480,000 men, and they took the top 5% in cholesterol levels. So they had cholesterol levels of over 290, so this should work. If cholesterol was really the boogeyman, we're going to bind it, we're going to poop it out, and it's going to be stuck to these Crestor molecules, these bile acid sequestrants. So lowering the cholesterol should work if cholesterol is really the boogeyman. All right, so what happens?
So this was 1984, and they spent a buttload of money.
Oh, $140 million, yeah.
Which is what
Which is
today?
$405 million, almost $500 billion in this drug.
All right, so at the time, this was big. And
now to this date, like this drug is used for like constipation because it causes diarrhea.
Oh.
Well, actually, no. I got that reversed. It helps with diarrhea and causes constipation. So, yeah, it doesn't work. It actually will increase your triglycerides. Another lovely little side effect. And I get a lot of this data from YouTube videos, such as David Diamond. There's a couple other people, and I also in the show notes I will give references for all the people that I have watched, as well as the original articles that they cite in the show notes for the show. All right, so they follow these people for a long time, 7 years.
Okay, so what are the results of that study?
Well, it really wasn't statistically significant.
How about that?
Yeah, amazing. But we're going to publish it anyways, right? That's not science. But anyway, so this is what they do. They publish this, and you get this. So the results of the study was a 1.6%. Right? So next slide.
Yeah, me moving my hand like that means
next
slide, please. Okay,
so let's talk about like why do you take a drug? Right? Bottom line is I want to live longer, right?
Sounds like a reasonable expectation. Okay.
Does it make sense that I would decrease my cardiovascular events? Well, it would seem like that would be a good thing, but only a third of people who have cardiovascular events are going to die. So does it really help me? If I'm going to be taking this drug for 20, 30 years, actually help me live longer. So the actual benefit is 1.6%. So the 1.6% improvement versus a 2% in the placebo group.
All right, so when you're looking at this slide, it's the far left-hand column there.
Right.
1.6% versus 2% of cardiovascular heart deaths.
So between the red and the blue line is a 0.4%. It's not even 1%.
Okay, a slight, tiny difference between those two. So
the absolute improvement is 0.4%. That's the absolute improvement.
Okay, tiny, small.
Tiny, itty-bitty. And it doesn't make for an interesting looking graph.
But
when I love David Diamond because he says this is statistical alchemy. He says you can take lead and make it gold by saying it's a 24% improvement.
Okay, how did
relative risk reduction of 24%. You and I go, it's 1 in 4. And this is when I was doing this journal club with my students at UCSF going, I don't know what relative risk is. What the heck is that? Somebody please explain it to me. I don't understand.
Okay. So relative risk means that
in relation to each other.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So the relative risk in this column was 0.4%.
0.4% was the absolute risk.
That was the absolute risk.
Right.
But relatively, when you compare one to the other, there is a 24% difference. And that's what the drug companies will tell you. This is 24% better, or 24. They make you think that 24% of people are not going to die if they take this statin drug.
Right.
But really, the difference is tiny.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
We're printing it. 24% off we go, right? It's already out there. They publish it. it's a done deal. But here's the thing, and I really want people to understand this, how important this concept is. Relative risk versus absolute risk, and maybe you can help explain it to your doctor. Here's the definition. Comes from Malcolm Kendrick, okay? So in his book, Cholesterol Con, sorry. He talks about your chances of winning the lottery is 1 in 15 million.
Okay.
I'm going to improve your odds, increase your relative improvement, right?
Right.
By 50%. And you're like, okay, wow.
So now I have a 1
Give me a bunch of money. I'm
7.5%?
going to improve. I'm going to increase your odds by 50%.
Okay.
Relative.
Yeah.
But I forget to say the word relative. Just like they did forget to say 24% relative risk improvement.
Just forgot.
So we went from 1% or 1 in 15 million to 1.5 in 15 million. So 1 minus the 0.5, right, is a 0.5% in absolute improvement terms.
Mm-hmm.
But when I compare the two, I get 50%.
Yeah.
That's huge.
You think that in that case, your chances of winning the lottery would be 1 in 7.5 billion.
Yeah, some ridiculous number.
but it's
like,
not.
yeah, I haven't really helped you out by much. It's like,
No.
it's now instead of being 1 in 15 million, it's more like, a whole lot less than that.
Yeah.
So here's another example. So let's say you have an investment, and I'm investing all your money for you, and I'm going to improve your relative improvement by 50%. Mm-hmm. So you're getting 0.5% from me. I'm taking a ton of fees, of course, but anyways, 0.5%, right? And I call you up and say, hey, I got some great news for you. I improved your relative improvement by 50%. So you're not getting 0.5% on your return. You're getting 1%.
Yeah.
That's garbage.
It is.
Right? When in actuality, it's like you've only improved my return by 0.5%. The absolute terms is so much minuscule in relation to the relative terms.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if you have a very tiny improvement of one drug over another drug or a placebo, okay? Mm-hmm. You might conceivably say that over time, those tiny amounts will add up to something bigger. Mm-hmm. But in the industry, this is not what we see.
We're not seeing any of that.
This is not what the drug reps, when they come to your office, say.
Does your doctor go up to you and say, hey, you're going to have a 1% improvement if you take Lipitor for the next 30 years?
Yeah.
And you're going to go, well, wait a minute. What's my side effects look like?
Yes.
Right?
Because
that's a lot. That's a long time to be taken. That's a lot of, good luck with that. Yeah. It's less than 1%. And we're going to talk about a review article where it really shows in primary prevention, it really is less than 1%. Mm-hmm. It's more like 0.8%. It's not much of in absolute terms. Less than 1%. And you're going to take this drug for how many decades? Yeah. And deal with these side effects? It's not worth it. I don't know. Well, I'll let the patients determine that.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about basically the discovery of these statins, because that was Crestor, which is a bile acid sequestrant, and now we're talking about these HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, statins. Mm-hmm. Right? Japanese man Akira Endo basically discovered mevastatin, right? And this is in 1973. And it's interesting about Mr. Akira Endo, because later on in life, and this should give you a little hint of where we're going here, and that is that Dr. Endo here, he later in life he ends up with an elevated LDL, and the doctor who is seeing him has no idea that he is basically the original inventor of the statins. Goes, yeah, you need to go on a statin. He goes, no, I'm not going on a statin.
Ah, interesting.
Interesting. So why, if the man that discovered it isn't willing to take it,
that should tell you something.
That should tell you a heck of a lot about the toxicity of this drug. But it didn't matter. They created it. Quickly, Sankayo, the company that endorsed him, mm-hmm. or that backed him, found that about half of their dogs were dying from cancer.
Half of the dogs in their
study,
in their trials.
They have to do a safety profile first, right?
Yes.
So both Merck and Sankayo, because Merck had also discovered lovastatin, right?
So
they drop out of the race.
Sankyo drops out.
Sankyo drops out. Merck drops out as well.
Yeah.
Right?
But they came back later.
But they come back. Of course, they make a great comeback. So 14 years later, Merck takes up the torch and, of course, the briefcase for a whole lot of money. And in 1987, the FDA approves Mevacor. When you're the first man on the block in a class of medication, you are making some money. So they are reaping the benefits, right?
Tell me, the picture on the bottom.
Oh, the red yeast rice.
Red yeast rice. What do you?
Well, a lot of people take this too, and that's basically it's a statin as well. It's like a simvastatin. So this is kind of it was a fungus that was isolated from this red yeast rice, right? And it's a natural remedy to lower cholesterol. I'd be really cautious with this, because the side effect of lowering your cholesterol is significant. And I want to talk about this in a whole nother episode where we just talk about the side effects. So if you have side effects like diabetes, rhabdo, which is like basically a muscle breakdown.
It's rhabdomyolysis.
Rhabdomyolysis. You have cancer, right? Dementia.
Like
these are
Alzheimer's.
huge, right? And I think this occurs in about a third of patients, but we don't really know because we don't really have the original data from the original studies. And I love talking about the controversy about that garbage. All right.
Okay.
So Bayer makes another drug, and it's called Baycol. And this is the most wicked, strongest statin there ever is, and it gets recalled.
It's like a much higher dose of statin.
Yes, and the only thing that really matters is this. Shareholders are crying about it. They thought it was a blockbuster drug, and all of a sudden, this is all about the money. This is all about shareholders. These are companies. They only want to make money.
Wait, why are the shareholders upset with it?
Because all of a sudden their stocks plummet when you get a drug recalled. So Baycol's Cerevastatin gets recalled, and this is like in 2001.
Okay,
and that was 53 deaths.
All right.
53, that's it.
So Baycol, because it's a higher dose, there are more side effects. There would be more, very serious side effects, like, for example, death.
Right.
And the drug gets recalled. We found out that Bayer, it's a German company, has been a little bit fast and loose with their data and the way they sell it.
Yeah,
and
Merck is definitely in that group for sure.
The shareholders sued their own company, because of loss of share price. Right?
Yeah, well, no. In this case with Bayer, it actually was a whistleblower that made a ton of money. A certain person in the marketing department at Bayer blew the whistle, and she made a ton of money.
Oh.
Unfortunately, those that had the lawsuits didn't make a ton of money. So Bayer had to pay out. But that's part of the business of being a drug company, that you're going to have recalls, there's going to be lawsuits against you. But overall, you're still going to make plenty of money. Kind of like Merck and the whole, the Merck and the Vioxx scandal.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
They still in the end came out with like a good $5 billion ahead.
Okay. Vioxx was not a cholesterol lowering drug.
No, this is kind of like Celebrex. It's a lot like NSAIDs, like a naproxen or Motrin.
Something you would use for, say, arthritis.
Right. Man, the amount of heart attacks that was experienced with Vioxx was significant. This is a good example of where a company gets their hand slapped for not disclosing the side effect data, and like 50,000 people, at least on record, had heart attacks because of Vioxx. This wasn't disclosed to the FDA. This is Merck. Okay, still made $5 billion.
But I remember thousands and thousands of
lawsuits on TV for days, right?
Yeah.
And some people think that's about 500,000 people that may have died or had heart attacks from Vioxx. I still think, in my humble opinion, that the statins are somewhere in that range, if not significantly more. We've been taking these for a long time.
Your point here is that Merck, again, fast and loose with the data, they were not revealing all.
That's right.
Manipulating the design of studies so that they benefited them. They obviously had a bias. One of the biases, of course, is the profit motive.
Yeah.
And when that's the case, some bad things happen, and they did. And they're giving us a drug and lying to us about it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And harm came to people. And no matter how much money a family gets, you can't bring back,
it's sad. It's really pathetic. It's all for the sake of money. And this is what I'm saying. Nobody cares about your health other than you.
Okay.
You are responsible for your health. And that's why people are watching this. And that's why people like myself and you, we want to get informed. We want to get educated. We want to understand this. We want to have, because we already have all the data that the doctor has, we want to know exactly what I can expect. Okay? Forget about the smoke and mirrors. Okay? You're here right now to understand what's going on. Should I take this drug or not? That's the informed consent that you should have.
And we're not saying that all drugs have this issue. But
don't ask me. I'm the unscripted pharmacist. I hate drugs.
Statins are unique in the world because they're like the world's most profitable drug.
Yeah, but they want to put it in the drinking water. They want to put it in.
Well, some people suggest
burger outlets and the condiments, right? Like they're here. And I worked as a pharmacist while patients, at Rite Aid are having their ice cream kind of ooze all over the pharmacy counter while they're getting their 80 milligrams of Lipitor, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
I've heard of people that would say something to the effect of, "Hey, if I take this statin, can I just eat this crappy food?"
Oh, for sure.
And they're serious.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're dead serious.
Folks, there's a better way.
Yeah, it's food. Fix your food, fix your problem, right?
It's a lifestyle problem that'll get you out of this fix.
Statin users on average weigh 10 pounds more than non-statin users.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and
strange.
Their wallet is a little bit lighter too.
Yeah. Well, you got to fill those pill trays. So let's go to this next slide.
Yeah.
This one's really cool because this is about Merck, right?
Okay.
This is with the all-cause mortality in LDL clinical trials with statins and the PCSK9 inhibitor. So these are all the studies. So awesome. Thank you.
And so as you see across the top here, it says 4S ideal. These are all different studies.
Yeah. Aren't they clever little names there?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
4S has 4,444 patients in it. What happened to the 445?
All right, so in all of these different studies, we're looking at all-cause mortality. Okay.
So that's the top line is how many subjects. Second line is what's the LDL reduction. So if you look over across, the 4S is a 25% reduction, right? So
keeping in mind that we think the medical community, the consensus is the lower your LDL, the less mortality you're going to have. Right.
Like we think, well, lowering the LDL lower and lower and lower is going to have better outcomes.
Okay.
But it's not a linear relationship like at all. Okay. It may hurt you by lowering your LDL too low. So these are the LDL reductions. You can see one in the Jupiter study, 50% reduction. That's pretty significant. So this drug does work. This drug does lower your LDL, but only if you're treating labs.
Like dogs?
No, as in like your lipid pal. Yeah, I know, that's funny. I like that.
Laboratory value.
Yeah, I didn't think about the dogs. But anyways, poor things. But okay, so then we talk about like what was the actual difference between the treated group, the people that were on the drug. Let's just go look at the first column there. 8.2%. Was an improvement in mortality versus the placebo, 11.5%. So you have a total all-cause mortality improvement of 3.3%. Why is that so significant? I mean, maybe you would consider it, but this was done by Merck. Merck just gets busted a couple years later, 10 years later, for the Vioxx scandal. So I'm suspicious of this data. First of all, everything you see on this screen, when it comes to these studies, you can't see the original data. You can't see the efficacy data, and you cannot see the side effect data because it is under lock and key. Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But you can see how minuscule this absolute mortality benefit is.
In the other studies, not
right,
the 4S
0.2, 1.5, 0%, 0.55%, 0.1%. These are small numbers.
So one of the things you look at when you're looking at studies, okay, is it peer reviewed and can your peers look at your data? And you're saying no, people cannot look at all of the data.
Right, and I don't care where you publish it either. Whether it's New England Journal of Medicine or JAMA, it doesn't even freaking matter because those chief and editors are paid for.
Yeah. The other thing is you want your studies to be reproducible.
Yeah,
and if you can reproduce a study, and you have to know how it's designed and what the data is in the previous study, and you can't. But if you can reproduce a study, then it goes toward how much confidence you have in that study. And so we saw in your slide that the 4S all-cause mortality of 3.3, it was not reproducible in any of these other studies.
Right. I would say, and we'll get to it too, there was a study called the All Hat study. It wasn't sponsored by the drug companies. You can imagine what the results were. No improvement. Zero.
No improvement from the use of statins.
No improvement for the use of statins, but that was one that wasn't sponsored by industry. When a study is sponsored by industry, the chances of it being positive are extremely high, right?
Yes. Now,
Extremely high.
I admit that I don't remember exactly where I read this, but the statistic I read was that for studies that are influenced by drug company money, okay,
Yeah.
drug company money went into it in some way, then the results are 5.3 times higher to be favorable toward the drug company than non-favorable.
That's right.
And that's 5.3%. No, not 5.3%. 5.3 times as likely.
More likely, yeah. And then another thing is with some of these studies, they actually stopped them early. Why do you stop studies early? You actually broke your own rules. When they first set that study, they say, these are the rules for continuing the study. So they break their own rules because of that relative risk improvement. The big number, not the little number, not absolute improvement, because that's garbage. We got to stop this study because it would be unethical, because it showed a 24% improvement relative risk. But you got to finish the sentence, and that's what bothers me when they do these studies. They need to put a little asterisk. Tell me what that number means. What is this whole number? Because we got Crestor, decreasing heart attacks by 46%. Same thing with Lipitor, 36%. That means 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 to me.
What you're saying is they would stop these studies early in order to bring the drug to market because they're seeing early data that may or may not be true.
Yeah.
that
Right.
there's a benefit.
Well, yeah. But it's sneaky stuff.
Yeah.
There's a reason, right? So studies that stopped early are extremely more likely to be advantageous for that drug, okay? That's something like, 60% more likely when you truncate a trial. But this is kind of when side effects start showing up. 1.9 years, that's not a whole lot of exposure. How long does it take for diabetes to show up?
Yeah.
How long does it take for cancer to show up?
Long
Dementia,
time.
right? It takes a little while. Right?
Yeah.
So studies that are done longer, we see a lot more side effects, oddly enough. I want to read something about really this. One doctor actually wanted to put it in burger outlets. Children were all of a sudden being tested for cholesterol and LDL, which is crazy. But I want to talk about this All Hat study. And the All Hat study, which was not industry funded, I want to read what the physicians thought of this. It says. It showed that pravastatin had no significant benefit in reducing either all-cause mortality or coronary heart disease in primary prevention. And really the investigators we really don't know how to explain these results. They didn't understand them. They actually said that.
Really?
I mean, actually wrote that, right?
About what year was that study?
The All Hat. Man, I don't know. You got to remember that one. But this is what's interesting. New England Journal of Medicine editor Marcia Angel, she says, it is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Your chief and editor.
That's a huge statement.
It is a huge statement,
that
right?
Is a huge
she
statement.
says, back in 1979, she says, starting about then was when we began to see the drug companies assert more power. Over the next couple of decades, they began to treat the researchers more like hired hands. So you've got this medical facility, basically you've I hate to say that we're pimped out, you're researchers, but they're paid for. They're your employees. You're buying them. And they're going to do the research that you want. And you're creating the designs. And when you create study designs, you can get real creative, right? You can figure out a way to really tease out the group that you want to actually show benefit.
It didn't used to be that way, did it? Like, And how long ago was it when our research was done by academics and by like trustworthy government
Back when
entities?
academia people didn't make much money? Is that what you're talking about? Like,
I'm asking how long ago.
professors don't make a ton of money.
Yeah,
but when
it's
you
true.
dangle a carrot in front of them.
Now they're getting drug company money.
Yeah, it's huge. All right.
Didn't this happen like in the 80s or something? That when we started going toward more drug company funded studies?
Yeah, there was a big hit in FDA funding, and when that happened, you all of a sudden saw a huge uptick in research funded by big industry. So that's kind of like when you start seeing, all right, there's conflicts here, right? It wasn't trustworthy. And then I think it's in 2004, really what came from this whole, let me read where we went with this, but
Okay.
man, I'm flustered. Okay. All right, so yeah, like we're jumping ahead of ourselves, but we will get to that, where they started making some guidelines as to what can be published and disclosure of conflicts of interest. Okay, that's only been within the last, say, 20 years. So when you look at your data, you need to really look at the origin, like how old is this data, and is it conflicted? And you can look this stuff up, okay? It's not just me that can look up this stuff. You can go to openpayments.com, you can find out, when you see something that's written by an expert, go look at them, look up that doctor and go, or that research and go, where are they getting their money? And you can look at, I know that you can go back from at least 2018, when you look up a doctor and go, all right, where did you get your money? All right, $3,500 honorary on this date for doing a talk, consultative fee. And they're getting entertainment and honorary and travel. And you start looking at that and you start realizing that these people that sit on these boards, like something like 59% of people that sit on guideline panels are industry sponsored. Okay? Frustrating. All right, so let's talk about the Lipitor. How many people on Lipitor? Tons of people on Lipitor. This is just another example of another study that basically was the same as the 4S study, and that was that Lipitor showed some huge improvement, 36% in all-cause mortality, right? So they'll advertise it as a 36% reduction in death. Okay? Absence of non-fatal MI and fatal coronary heart disease. So when you look at this graph, you see that 98.1% of people that were on Lipitor did not die. 97% of the people on the placebo did not die. That to me looks like a 1.1%. First of all, the chance of you dying is really, really low. Okay, it's significantly low from some sort of cardiovascular event, right? So here you are at 1.1%. These people were not very cooperative. More of them, I guess, could have died, but they didn't. Anyways, so you should have picked a better group. So you only have a 1.1% improvement between that red box and the blue box. But when you look at the relative risk of 1.1 over 3%, you get a 36%. So this is what the ad looks like, right?
Next slide, please.
Yeah, it should look like, oh my gosh, it should be a huge improvement. So if you see the next slide, you see a 36% improvement, right? That means, but if you look at the fine print, which is in small font, blue letters on a blue background, says that in a large clinical study, 3% of patients taking a sugar pill or placebo had a heart attack compared to 2% of the patients taking Lipitor.
Wait, they just told me it was 36% improvement. How could this be?
I mean, how many people will sit down with their doctor and go, it's a 1% improvement, a 1.1% improvement on the fact that, and you know what? It really isn't about LDL lowering. It's probably has something to do with other properties of the drug that may improve, and it's probably more like to do with coagulation or inflammation. So that's just conjecture.
Right. On the top of your last slide, you wrote that marketing.
Right. Statistics equals science.
Plus statistics
it's
equals
money.
Science. And sadly, you don't want this to be true. You hope that this is not
and
true.
half these studies
believe this would not be true, and yet,
I know.
Sadly, this
changes
is what we see in the
whole.
marketplace.
It changes trust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Bottom line is, it really changes. Who do you trust?
Yeah, like Dr. Angel, the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, said that
it's
sadly
not
can't
reliable,
trust it.
essentially.
Can't trust the trials.
Yeah, and there are certain people that are paid for that will argue this vehemently. Matter of fact, they'll even tell you have blood on your hands. Okay? If somebody says that to you, where's your conflicts? That's fine. Where are you getting your money?
There's good science out there too.
Oh, I would, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure there is.
You got to find it. It's not easy to dig up. The real stuff,
the All Hat study you
I love what you,
okay.
Essentially, as a scientist, your sole purpose should be to prove your hypothesis as wrong. If you try to, like crazy, try to prove your hypothesis as being something that's wrong, okay? If you can't do that, then it must be true. Or it may be true. There's always a null hypothesis, right?
Right.
Your sole purpose is, I got to prove myself wrong. And that's when you keep being curious. Ansel Keys, he thought he was right from the beginning and never tried to prove himself wrong. And that's how we got to this point, because the focus was on fat in the bloodstream and this cholesterol. Trust me, LDL particles and cholesterol all of a sudden didn't turn on us from an evolutionary standpoint and kill us. It wasn't like all of a sudden cholesterol that is found in the real cholesterol, which is really like, your body wants this. It would rather not make it, right? It needs it to survive, right?
Cholesterol is a structural
Oh man, it's such an important, like we
for
talked about last time, right? It's so important to make sex hormones, to make cortisol, to make membranes, to have, in order to have a brain, like it's so incredibly useful. It wasn't like all of a sudden from an evolutionary standpoint, it is now turned on you, it is now bad. That should raise a lot of suspicion, okay? As should this. Who should be on statins? Everybody. Okay, so.
Okay, but there's got to be you made mention of this earlier, a subset of people that.
Yeah, it's a very small subset. Okay, secondary prevention. You've already had an MI. That's important. Or you have these clotting factors, as well as this small, dense LDL, and we can tell by triglyceride to HDL ratio. I want to talk about that at the very end, but as well.
Okay, but, that's primary versus secondary. Okay.
But how do you improve your profits? You lower the goalposts, right?
Okay, so all right, so you're the guy selling Lipitor, and you want to sell more. What you do is you change the guidelines for people that are eligible to receive Lipitor.
Yeah.
You make it easier.
Right.
You include more people. Say, for example, people that, all right, so your guidelines say you want to give Lipitor to people that are obese or have hypertension,
some sort of
diabetes,
risk factor,
those sorts of things.
Healthy people.
You lower those numbers. You change hypertension from 150 over 100 to 130 over 90. You do something like that.
All
I'm not saying
everyone's on it,
happened.
right? But it's very easy to lower the goalposts, lower the standards.
Lower the goalposts.
And next thing you know, everyone needs to be on it.
Wait, did this happen?
This happened.
Oh no.
Next slide. This one's, and I'm including this as a reference to this show, and that is, it's a review article that was written by John Abramson and others about how did we get to this point. So 6% of people were qualified for statins, and this is how they made it go from 6% to 60%. How do you make more money? You lower the goalposts. And this is what's really irritating, and I hope that you're standing up when you're watching this thing, because basically what it shows is that when you have the National Cholesterol Education Program tell you that we're going to lower the goalposts based on no scientific data. Sorry, I'm going to get really worked up because this is really irritating. And that these people who sit on this committee, 8 out of 9 of them, because this wasn't originally disclosed in the New England Journal of Medicine when they published this, okay? It wasn't until a week later, after it's already printed, right? And these standards, that was actually somebody really smart from, it was David Willman, reported in the Los Angeles Times that one of the authors of the NCEP update, a full-time employee of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, overseeing the formulation of the cholesterol guidelines, received $114,000 in consulting fees from statin makers between 2001 and 2003. 8 out of the 9 people that sat on that committee were paid for by industry.
These are the guys that lower the goalpost.
They lower the goalpost. That's okay. You messed up. That's fine.
Yeah, retract it.
Retract it. But you didn't retract it, right? 1 week after the recommendations were published, the conflict started to appear in the press. The National Institutes of Health put the complete list on the website. 8 of the 9 authors had financial ties to statin makers. That's a lot, first of all. But you could have retracted it. You could have said, oh no, let's redo it. All right? So, man, do we have time to talk about this last, about something stinks here, about Rory Collins? Let's talk about Rory Collins. I'd love to talk about the head of the FDA, which is Dr. Robert Califf. But anyways, Rory Collins, he is notorious for, he is the head of the CTT, which is the cholesterol treatment trialist collaboration. So it's a group of people that they just do these statin studies, okay? That is where the vault is. He has ties to that vault, and he acts like he doesn't know what's going on. That is where the original efficacy data is, and that is also where all the side effect data from those original studies that we saw earlier. He has it in his possession, and is not available for independent review.
That's the vault.
That's the vault, and he gets paid millions of dollars. It's something like 260 million pounds he's basically collected to keep a tight lip on that. And he says, oh, I haven't seen all the side effect data. But he claims that the serious side effects is only 1 in 10,000. I don't think so, Rory, and here's why. Because about 1/3 of the people that took this study when they did the run-in period couldn't tolerate the drug to do the study. So I think it's more like 30%, and that's what I want to talk about in our next episode, is that how many people are really suffering from these side effects? What is the real number, Rory? Why don't you show us what it really is? Okay? We're tired of taking your word for it, but when we do our study, we show it's about 29%, right? There's a lot of people with diabetes that wouldn't have had diabetes before, and I think that number is in the millions. And that's why I'm saying you should do a recall.
This is a side effect that we haven't really touched on much.
We haven't, no. I want to talk about statin side effects.
For
Absolutely.
increasing your blood sugar levels and causing diabetes.
Yeah, I'm all worked up now.
Yeah.
I get really upset. But there's something you can do about it. Not just by watching this program, but you can go, and I've listed this in the references to this talk, and that is essentially that you can go to a Lipitor settlement website. You can find out for yourself, and it will ask you what's your name, and get all this information. There's a smart lawyer out there that's going to take on a lot of big drug companies, okay? I would love to have Rory's data, but if you won't let us have the data, you shouldn't make us take this stuff. It shouldn't be on these guideline panels, okay? It shouldn't be a requirement to live, and they want to put it in, the drinking water as well as everybody over the age of 50. And you women, you're just along for the ride. And we're talking about increasing diabetes from 6% to 11%. That's a 5% increase. Start doing some math and go, okay, that's 85 million people that are on this drug. That's too much. So stay informed, right? Do what you can. Be informed. Understand what informed consent really is. Weigh that risk-benefit very carefully. Not everybody dies from a heart attack. Cholesterol and LDL is not the boogeyman. It's part of being alive. Okay, part about being a human being. All right.
If it's not statins, if that's not the answer, what is?
It's food. That's the elephant in the room. When you do a low carbohydrate diet, magically that triglyceride to HDL ratio improves. You heard it here.
All right, thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Chris. That was fun.